I'd like to start out with one question about how you've gotten yourself into being sort of the go-to guy where addiction and alcoholism is concerned, and how you got started in New York State in the prison system. How did that work?
Well, in the late 50s, I was assigned to St. John's on Green Street, which was the combat zone of the Albany turf with the prostitution, with the drugs. And it was a feeling of, this is an area, about a 12-block area, where they contained crime. So if they used drugs there, that'd be okay. But if you moved out of that one block one way or the other, then you would get cuffed. So I wound up being a pastor at St. John's for 18 years, and therefore I had in charge of what that turf would be. It was the combat zone, and I met a lot of the people. While there, I was also appointed jail chaplain to the Albany County Jail and as chaplain to the court. So I went to court every morning and met the people in court, and I would try to then talk with the judge and say, you know, this guy is just what they called the 24040. That was a public intoxication. I'd be happy to try to work with him, judge. And the judge was okay, and he'd line them up about 50 a day and say, do you want to go to jail? Do you want to go to father? Do you want to go to jail? Do you want to go to father? Okay, follow father out and bring him down. I had 14 buildings down in the parish. A lot of the people had moved out, and I had a chance to inherit a lot of the buildings in the South End at that time. And especially with our school closing, our other different programs closing, we had a lot of available space. So I said, I'd utilize the space. I put mattresses on the floor in the gym and took in about 80 or 120, and then more than that every night. So I just took those people that were homeless and put them into a situation where I'd go and beg for the food for Freihofer at that time, and beg for the kind of produce that would get from the market, and we try to get the guys doing a lot of their own kind of stuff. So sheltering people is where I started, and then seeing the need of those people that I had in my pocket, so to speak, I had a chance to try to find out what's wrong, because at night they're falling apart and they're doing strange things with their unfit seizures, DT, convulsions, things of that type. But then in the morning, I'd sit down and they would be trying to drink coffee, and I would say, you know, you're a nice guy, why? And they would talk, I don't know, I just felt the urge to have a drink, Father, I need a drink. And I would say, you know, therefore there's something medically going on. So in looking at that, I said, this is not a crime, it's a disease. Then I spent 14 years of my life trying, if I could, to prove it. And I had over 35,000 meetings, only about 3 miles away, less than 3 miles, really 1 mile and a quarter to the Capitol. So I said, I know where I'm going to make a change in this, I've got to go to the Capitol. And that's where I met Rocky and Governor Rockefeller and all of the people that were in agreement with me. And then the door opened where I got some chance to make a lot of things happen. So
you really had an impact on the Rockefeller drug laws. I mean, the things that have become sort of a legend, you know, like the New York State is seen as the wrong place to be caught, you know, doing drugs or whatever, but it's also, I think the underlying story is it's the best place in a sense because of the work that you've done to separate out the whole thing about the penal code of public intoxication.
Right, we did succeed in the penal code in the idea of the decriminalization. I often refer to as destigmatization because it finally became what it is now. It's an illness, a disease, and therefore because of that now we're getting treatment. It's treatable and beatable. But at that time, the governor agreed with me. I was a chance at knowing Albany and knowing a few of the people. I knew his secretary and his program chief of staff. So I went up and had coffee with them, and they said, come on, let's go have lunch with the governor. And so I had lunch, and at that time he cut the crust off the sandwiches, and we'd have lunch with him, and he said, well, now how did you get interested in this? And I began to get a very friendly relationship with the governor, and the governor said, you know, you're right, I want to go and work with you. I'll give you a job here of free, I can't give you anything, but I'll give you a parking place next to my car. And that'll tell people what we think of you. So I got a parking place on the ramp right next to the governor.
That's a great ramp.
It was something that helped because I could come in, do my thing, and get out. And it was an amazing thing. But I was there on January the 3rd, 1973, when the people came in and he made the announcement that he was running for national office. And he said, I'm running, I'm going in. And I was in the room, and they said, Governor, you're too soft on drugs. you're too soft on this heroin problem we have in Harlem. And the governor said, what do you think I should do? And the people said, you got to get tough on crime, you got to get tough on drugs. And that's when he then got advice of, well, we're going to lock them up. And he said, it might be a good idea. If I'm going to run for national office, I'll have to go with that agenda. And he came over and he apologized to me, after the meeting and after an opportunity of talking with him, because I did write the RDL 1, the Rockefeller Drug Law 1, which would be a law that would allow people to have a diversion program. If they admitted addiction, they could then go to court, admit addiction, and they would go into treatment. And that was down in Woodburn Correctional Facility. And then in '73, it became an entirely different thing. They cuffed people and put people in jail for their abuse and use of drugs.
So we were talking about, you got 41,000, there's 41,000 guys or something like that who were in the prison program and have come out. You call them your friends.
Right.
And you talked about how much you enjoy working in prison with these guys. Can you go into that? I mean, most people would say, why would you enjoy that?
Oh, I had a fine time. I was 18 years working on the street, working in the county, and then I was transferred. I tried to start a minority driving school, which the kind of people that were administrating where the field of transportation was at that time didn't agree. The unions and others were in total opposition, because I knew that Selkirk was coming in as a program, a large distribution center, and the new law of '64 said if you're going to be driving rigs around and across state lines, then you have to have affirmative action. I said, here's an idea. I have all minorities in the locale that I'm in Green Street, in that south end of Albany, and they need to be employed, and therefore here's an opportunity for me. So I ridiculously bought tractor trailers. And with that, I got into a heavy debt, and the heavy debt got me into prison, because with the heavy debt, I got into it. They were dropping my transmissions at night. They were putting sugar in my gas tanks, and I wound up with junk. So they were keeping me out of the market, and therefore I lost the school, and I still had the payment that I had to make to pay off the rigs. So it turned out to be a bit of a disaster for me. It turned out to be a problem and a half, because now I've got a heavy bill, and I'm saying, they've often said, can you come in and be a chaplain in the Department of Corrections? And I said, maybe I can, because they pay you. They paid in the state. Good idea. And I had to pay off these debts. So then I quickly volunteered to go into the prison system, the State Department of Corrections, to try to work with them. And they said, you've been doing a lot of this with addictions, and this is what a lot of these people have as they come through the truck trap into our jail, into our prison. So why don't you try to set up a program? And I did, and as a result of that, in due time, it gravitated into, when I retired, I had around 40-some thousand in the program that I was the founder of. So as a founder, I just take great pride in the idea of being able to be there, because when you see the need, you want to try to find a way to respond.